Harmon had assets, that he only had to sit tight for a few more months until no one would notice, or care, or dare object to the slow hemorrhage of funds from one or more of those ubiquitous off-budget offshore accounts into his personal account. No need to stir up the suits in accounting or the IRS, not yet, especially the IRS. Slow and steady would do the job. Hell, as far as Harmon was concerned, they owed him for all he'd done for them over the years, ungrateful bastards. They owed him big time. Instead, they'd chosen to dump him. Well then, they'd pay for that. Simple. No way would he give it back, either. To hell with the big shots and all the pussies who worked down there. He'd paid his life insurance premiums, and as far as they were concerned, he was officially dead. So, okay, fine. Now he'd be his own beneficiary. He looked at his watch. What had happened to Barstow anyway? Night rolled in from the west like 12-foot tides that characterized this part of the Maine coast, accompanied by a salty mist that hung in the air and made Harmon uneasy. He couldn't say why. He walked to the center of the porch, ignoring the squeak of loose boards, pivoted on his heel, and started back the way he'd come. Soon he'd need to light a lamp. He stretched and searched his pockets for a match. What was keeping that smarmy wheeler-dealer anyway? He heard a scraping sound behind him. How had Barstow arrived at Cliffside without walking up the path? Harmon turned and squinted into the darkness. "So, it's you," he said, and after a pause, "How'd you find me?" "It was only a matter of time. I have friends in high places." "How high would that be?" "Never mind. So, what happens now?" "We walk. We talk." Mary Smithwick had celebrated her 75th birthday the previous month, shortly before she left Chevy Chase to take up her annual summer residence on Scone Island. Her early arrival in late May meant it was her year to open her house before the rest of the family, if any, arrived in the third week of June. She and her family, when she still had one, had spent the 3 summer months, June, July, and August, on the island every year as far back as she could remember. No, that wasn't correct. There were those years in the mid-40s during the war when it was not possible to travel from Utica, where she'd grown up, to the island. Her memories were sketchy, as she'd been very young at the time. The government restricted travel back then, and the Coast Guard had taken up a position on the island. They'd replaced the old lighthouse on the eastern point of the island with a watchtower to surveil for German U-boats and to track convoys heading across the Atlantic to England or Murmansk. Also, they had established a Coast Guard station in Southport in the Bight, ostensibly to serve as a rescue point should one of the ships, Liberty ships they were called, be torpedoed and sink. The coast artillery arrived shortly afterwards and built gun emplacements on the point next to the tower as well. She couldn't remember if they'd ever fired at a German submarine. Or was it aircraft? She never found out which, but in any case, she liked to think they had. During the war years, most of the cottages had been commandeered by the government to house their personnel. The few families who'd managed to get to the island then had stories to tell. Oh my, yes. Well, that was a long time ago, and the world had changed so much. Now she enjoyed her retirement after 30 years of government service, alternately living out the winter months in the snug condominium she owned in Maryland and summering on the island. Old friends from the past made sure there was always something for her to do, so her mind stayed active and excited, even if her body had lost some of its spring. She walked steadily along the gravel path the residents insisted on calling West Road to Cliffside, the largest house on the island. Harmon Staley, who'd bought Cliffside from the Willards back in the fall, had said, "Yes, indeed. You're more than welcome to pick wild strawberries over on the fence line." Cliffside, for as long as she could remember, had had tiny wild berries ripening under the leaves that collected at the fence every spring, weeks before the cultivated ones were ready elsewhere. It had become a Scone Island tradition, or once was. Not many of the new owners or the descendants of the old ones cared for that sort of thing.